What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, July 25th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Huge 13-game MLB slate tonight. A lot of different ways you can go. I have really flat player exposures right now, so I think there's going to be a lot of different spots to talk about, a lot of different interesting spots to get to. There's some high upside pitching on the slate, but for a 13-game slate, relatively weak pitching overall. A lot of good hitting environments, a lot of relatively high team totals. So should be a pretty fun one to talk about. I'm going to go through game by game as always, using the Run the Sims projections that you see on the screen. You can subscribe to our projections at Run the Sims. If you're not familiar, this is the site that I now own along with Unicow, Brick75, and Nerdy Tenor. We have our MLB projections up. You can subscribe using the link in the description below. $100 a month for the full projections package. Gets you everything you see on the screen. Downloadable, fully detailed projections straight out of our in-house play-by-play sims. You can use them for betting if you want to. Obviously, use them for DFS. If you don't need the full projections package, you can get the MLB Draft Caddy option for $10 a month, and that just overlays the DraftKings projection straight onto your lineups page. Helpful for hand building, helpful for late swapping, whatever you need to do. Link is in the description below. Highly recommend checking these out. I'm having a good year with them. I've been happy with them. So check those out. Link in the description below. Going to go game by game as always. If you have questions, throw them in chat. I'll touch on the players I'd be getting to if the slate started right now. Again, take that with a grain of salt. It's early in the day. Lock isn't for 7 hours. Lineups are going to come out. Ownership's going to change, etc. But at least gives us another talking point for how I see the slate looking right now. And so starting things off with these are out of order, with the Rockies taking on the Orioles in Baltimore. And this is one of the interesting spots already, I think, to get to. We have Kyle Freeland going for the Rockies. We have Dean Kramer on the mound for the Orioles. Obviously, great matchup for Dean Kramer. It doesn't get better than facing Colorado. Unbelievably bad team. A lot of strikeouts. You're getting them outside of Coors Field as well. 26.5% strikeout percentage on their active roster against right-handed pitching is the highest mark in baseball. 78 WRC plus is the worst. So great matchup for Kramer. He is likely to be popular. I have him projected for around 34% ownership today at 8K because of the really good matchup, reasonable price tag. I think he's obviously a good play. That said, right now I'm only getting to about 15%, so I am around half the field. There are plenty of other pitching options that give you a similar range of outcomes, but there's no argument. There's no denying that Dean Kramer projects well. He's certainly a good play here. And with it being a 13-game slate as well, you can get low-owned hitters in a million different places to pair with him if you want to go Dean Kramer. So I think clearly a good play, just one that I'm personally below the field on right now. I'm not even super confident saying that I'll be below the field later on. Like, I think he's obviously a good play. The one that is really interesting to talk about, though, I think, is the other side here with Kyle Freeland. Freeland's only $5,500 here. He is getting outside of Coors Field. It's still a dangerous matchup against the Orioles. Like, this is still a talented lineup, but they are still banged up. You don't have Ryan Mountcastle. You don't have Adley Rutschman. As a result, specifically, of not having Rutschman, you have either Jacob Stallings or Alex Jackson at catcher. So whoever's in the lineup at catcher just can't hit for shit. And then there's different ways that this lineup can go. In the last game where they faced the lefty, or 2 games ago against the lefty, against Joey Cantillo, they actually didn't start Tyler O'Neill. They had Cedric Mullins batting 5th. Cantillo does have some reverse splits, and that was alluded to on the broadcast as a reason that maybe the Orioles went that route. But the Orioles, for the most part, their best hitters are left-handed, and as a result, this team has struggled against left-handed pitching this season. Gunnar Henderson is left-handed. Cowser is left-handed. Mullins is left-handed. O'Hearn is left-handed. So Jackson Holliday is left-handed. So you either get a lineup where they have their more talented hitters in there, but you're getting a lot of lefty-lefty matchups, or you get the more platoon-heavy lineup where there are more righties, but you're talking about righties like Kobe Mayo, who is a very high K guy, in place of, maybe Ryan O'Hearn or something like that. So it's really difficult for the Orioles to put out a lineup that doesn't at least have some sort of positive for a left-handed pitcher against them. And then for Freeland here, he's 5,500. Like, I've said it a million times in the past, but 5,500 for a fully stretched out major league level starting pitcher is always going to be too cheap anyway. But then you're talking about a pitcher in Freeland who is getting outside of Coors Field, so he's getting a park bump. For Camden Yards specifically, it's good for home runs for left-handed hitters, not good for power for righties. Very difficult to hit right-handed home runs, and you're going to be more concerned about the right-handed power against Freeland than the left-handed power because those are the guys that have the platoon advantage. So that really, from a ballpark standpoint, helps him. And then he's actually been a good, solid pitcher this year. He's not a great strikeout pitcher, which is why he never really gets much love in DFS. But he's been solid in terms of, xFIP, FIP, run prevention, or at least expected run prevention. And then if you look at just his numbers on the road this year, 3.73 xFIP outside of Coors, 3.52 FIP. Strikeout percentage goes from 15.3% at home to 17.7% on the road. K minus BB percentage on the road is 13% compared to 8.1% at home. This is like a $7,000, $7,200 pitcher probably outside of Coors Field at 5,500, only projected for around 5% ownership right now as well. So I am getting to Freeland around 28% of the time at that 5% ownership number that actually right now makes him my highest owned player on the entire slate, regardless of position. Again, not committing to Kyle Freeland is my highest owned player today, but right now Kyle Freeland would be my highest owned player. Again, 28% isn't a huge amount. It does speak to it being a 13-game slate as well. My exposures are pretty spread out, but I think Freeland's going overlooked. I think he's a good point per dollar play. The Orioles do have a high team total here at like 5.5. But you always have to keep in mind, too, that part of that is being derived by the fact the Rockies' bullpen isn't good either. So, like, Freeland can give you 5-6 innings, give up 1 or 2 runs, and the Orioles still have a good chance of scoring 6 runs in the game. So, again, I'm not saying that, like, I have a lot of confidence in Freeland or it's a great matchup, but it is a more favorable matchup for a lefty than a righty against the Orioles. I do think Freeland is a more talented pitcher than a $5,500 price tag suggests. You have plenty of bats to pay up for on a 13-game slate. And he's not getting ownership right now anyway. So I do like getting to Freeland here and just kind of rolling the dice. For the offenses, you have Colorado going up against a popular pitcher in Kramer. I do think you could make the case for getting some negative correlation against a middle-of-the-road arm like Kramer. That being said, I'm not getting too much of it. 151 expected ISO allowed to righties this year for Kramer, 197 for lefties. Left-handed power does play better in this park. If you're looking for left-handed power, you basically have Mickey Moniak at 3,800, who has been hitting very well recently. You have Ryan McMahon, who is a solid hitter overall, also 3,800. You have Toglia at 3,300. Those are pretty much your left-handed power bats in this lineup. For me, I'm getting to 7% Hunter Goodman, 5% Moniak, less than 5% of everyone else. The field is getting to less than 5% of everyone. So I do think the Rockies are one of many teams that, if you wanted to say, hey, I'm going to be overweight on this 3% owned team, like there is merit to it, given that Kramer is going to have 35% ownership or so. But it's not one that I'm prioritizing. I am getting to a lot of the Orioles on the other side. So like I said, I'm getting to a lot of Freeland. But in lineups that don't have Freeland, I do like the Orioles here as well. It's not like Freeland is a great pitcher. It's not like it's a good bullpen behind him. They do have a high total here. It's hot and humid in the sort of Baltimore area. I'm like an hour and a half away right now, and it's disgusting. I assume it's the same in Baltimore. So you're not getting a ton of ownership to the O's either. 5 to 10% ownership coming in for most of this lineup. 11% to Westberg, 11% to O'Neill, 10 to Gunnar, 6 to Holiday, 8 to Laureano, who's been fantastic this year. So I do like playing both sides of this one. I think the pricing is reasonable on both sides. I think that there is some upside. Not that Freeland's a great strikeout pitcher, but there will probably be strikeouts in this lineup. And then on the other side, the Orioles certainly still have power. So I'm getting the 25% Westberg at 4,600. Second base and third base eligible is really nice. I'm getting to 21% O'Neill, only $3,300 because he's not having a good year. He's only played like 35 games or something. He's been hurt 2 prolonged stints on the injured list. He's missed a bunch of games here and there for recovery or most recently general soreness. It's just been basically a lost year for Tyler O'Neill, but we still know that he has a track record of being a good hitter, of being somebody that has plenty of power. So I think this $3,300 price tag against the lefty is a little cheaper than it should be. Jackson Holiday, I'm getting 19%. I have 17% apiece on Gunnar and Laureano. I'm not getting much of Mayo, O'Hearn, Hauser, but Westberg, O'Neill, Holiday, Henderson, Laureano, probably like 1 through 5. Maybe O'Neill hits 6. probably 5 of your top 6 hitters. I am getting to them here against Freeland. So I do have both sides of that one. Next, we have the Phillies taking on the Yankees in New York. I know I'm getting to offense in this game as well. Will Warren going for the Yankees, Taijuan Walker going for the Phillies. No ownership coming into Taijuan Walker, and I don't think that there should be. Very, very dangerous matchup against the Yankees. Also, just not a particularly good pitcher. 18% strikeout percentage this year, 4.46 xFIP. Certainly could be worse. Like I would have guessed it was worse, but not somebody that I think I need to get to on this slate. On the other side, you do have Will Warren in a difficult matchup, but a 3.5 xFIP for Warren this year in 99 innings pitched to go along with a 26.5% strikeout percentage. I do like taking shots on him in tournaments. Only projected for about 6% ownership right now at only $7,300. I'm getting to 17% of him. I like the strikeout upside. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, there are good strikeout arms on this slate, but most of them have at least some question about them, whether it is simply the matchup or, general effectiveness concerns to go along with the strikeout upside. I don't think there's a lot of just like slam dunk pitching plays on this slate. Already mentioned, Dean Kramer being 35% owned. Any slate where Dean Kramer is 35% owned when there are 13 games going, even if he's facing the Rockies, is going to speak to the overall quality of the pitching on the slate. So I do think somebody like Warren, who is $700 just to compare him to Kramer, he's $700 less expensive. Yeah, the matchup against the Phillies is obviously like exponentially more difficult than a matchup against the Rockies, but he's a much better strikeout pitcher than Kramer. He's a better pitcher overall. He's getting 1/7 of the ownership, 1/6 of the ownership. I'm fine with taking some shots on him for that upside against Philadelphia, despite it being a tough matchup. Philly's active roster against right-handed pitching this season does rank 11th in WRC+. They rank 24th in strikeout percentage. So again, not a good matchup, but if it was a good matchup, he would be a hell of a lot more popular. So I do like the upside you're getting there. For Phillies bats against him, nothing really standing out to me. I have 11% Kyle Schwarber. I have 12% Harper. They're projected for 8 and 6% ownership, respectively. So you do have the left-handed power bats in Yankee Stadium. Warren has allowed a 199 expected ISO to lefties this year compared to only 104 to righties, only striking out 21% of lefties compared to 33.5% of righties. If you are going to target bats against Will Warren, it's generally going to be left-handed bats with power that you want. And then you add Yankee Stadium on top of that. I do like Schwarber. I do like Harper. You have a $3,500 price tag on Max Kepler if you want to go there. Bryson Stott's $4,400. But for me, the guys standing out as the Phillies I'm getting to the most are Harper and Schwarber, which is exactly obviously what I would want. Playing some Kyle Freeland makes that easier to do as well. On the other side for New York, about a 5.5 total against Taijuan Walker. And I'm getting to the Yankees pretty heavily here. 14% projected ownership coming in to Aaron Judge is the high mark for the field. I am about 1.5 times that at 23%. Walker, so far this season, as I mentioned, 4.5, give or take, xFIP, 214 expected ISO allowed to righties, hasn't allowed any expected power whatsoever to lefties, sub 100 expected ISO, 293 expected WOBA. If you go back to last season, 171 expected ISO to lefties, 254 to righties. So I think most likely the reverse splits for the power numbers from Walker probably are true in that he's going to give up more power to righties than to lefties. I don't buy into Taijuan Walker is just an elite pitcher against lefties. You can't play lefties against him, especially in Yankee Stadium. But for Aaron Judge specifically, it doesn't even matter, obviously. Right-handed bat sets up really nicely here against Walker. I like getting to him. I'm getting to 18%. Trent Grisham at only 6% projected ownership at 4,200. Stanton getting 8%. Jazz getting around 8%. I have 17% of Stanton, 14 of Jazz. Austin Wells is getting 6% ownership. Belly's at 7%. Goldie's at 6%. So you basically just have like 4 to 8% ownership projected to everybody on the Yankees outside of Aaron Judge. And I'm over the field on pretty much all of that. 11% Wells, 11% Bellinger, 9% Goldie, 5% apiece on Volpe and Peraza is pretty much in line with the field. But overall, I am heavy on the Yankees. They are my highest owned stack right now. Happy to get there. High team total. Don't have to worry about the ownership too much because of it being a 13-game slate. So I think that looks good. Next, we have the Dodgers taking on the Red Sox in Fenway. So another good park for offense. Mentioned at the top of the show that there were going to be a lot of good offensive environments, and this is certainly one. And you're getting arguably the best offense in baseball in the Dodgers, though they have struggled a bit lately going into Fenway. So about a 5.5 total for the Dodgers, between 4.5 and 5 for Boston. Brian Bayo pitching for the Red Sox, Emmett Sheehan pitching for the Dodgers. $6,400 price tag on Sheehan, $7,800 on Bayo. It is a better matchup for Sheehan than for Bayo. I do think Bayo is a solid pitcher. We've seen ups and downs from him throughout his major league career so far, still relatively young. When he's on, he can generate some strikeouts, and he does generally do a good job of keeping the ball on the ground. That being said, only an 18% strikeout percentage through 92 innings pitched so far this season. I'm not getting him at 7,800 in this spot. Neither is the field. Only 3% ownership coming into Emmett Sheehan. I'm getting the 13% of him. I do like the $6,400 price tag. He is a pitcher that has strikeout upside. He was not very good his last time out. I don't remember who he faced or exactly what he did, but I remember having, I think, over 4.5 strikeouts and it not even being a sweat because he pitched so poorly. But he's only 6,400. This is a pitcher that at AAA this year, 5 starts, 17 2/3 innings pitched, struck out 42% of hitters. Obviously, you're not expecting that to translate to the majors, but pretty much every publicly available projection system expects him to be an above average strikeout pitcher. Zips has him at 24.5%. That is the lowest strikeout percentage of any of the models that you can find on Fangraphs. Oopsie is the high mark at 28.5%. That's a model that factors in a lot of the most up-to-date pitch data metrics. So it's one I like looking at because it's not simply regressing guys from AAA to the majors. It's not treating all of these prospect arms the same. It is accounting for their stuff. It is accounting for things that we can know. We know that they do well individually. So Sheehan projects to be an above average strikeout pitcher. Again, this park, pitching in Fenway in July, it's certainly not a safe spot, but he is only 6,400. The Red Sox active roster has the third highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching in baseball this year. Only the Rockies and the Angels have struck out more. So I like the ownership discount. I like the price discount. I think there's certainly upside for Sheehan, although there is, of course, plenty of downside as well. I like him at this ownership number. For the offenses here, starting on the Dodgers side, 13% ownership coming into Ohtani, 15% coming into Betts, who is day-to-day. Missed the other day for personal reasons. Remains to be seen if he's in today. Other than those two, you're getting like 5 to 8% ownership across the board. I'm not getting to the Dodgers too much here, which does scare me. Obviously, I would like to get them in Fenway, but at the same time, there are 26 offenses today. I don't plan on just playing like 3% of all of them. So there's going to be ones just undoubtedly that I like that I just don't happen to get to. And right now, the Dodgers, for the most part, do look like one of them. The exception is that I do have 20% Shohei Ohtani. It goes without saying, it's Shohei Ohtani. He's great. He gives you stolen base upside. He hits home runs every day. He has first base and outfield eligibility. And if I'm going to play a lot of Kyle Freeland, I would hope that I'm able to get to Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani and Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper, because if not, what is the point of taking on the Kyle Freeland risk? Same for Emmett Sheehan, in this game. If I'm going to take on risk on cheap pitching, I'm going to get to Shohei Ohtani, even if I'm not getting to the full Dodger stacks. So obviously Ohtani looks great. Other than that, I have 8% Betts, 7% Pajes, 5% or less of everyone else, but certainly not a spot where I would talk anyone off of the Dodgers in Fenway Park. One thing to keep in mind is that while Fenway Park is a very good park for offense, Dodger Stadium is actually the best park for home runs in baseball. So it's not that you're going from Dodger Stadium to a bad park for offense, but you are actually getting a downgrade in park factor for home runs here. And again, Bayo's not a horrible pitcher either. 162 expected ISO to lefties, 137 to righties this year. So by all means, the Dodgers are really good. You can play them in Fenway, but there are, negatives is probably too strong of a word, but things that aren't ideal for the Dodgers. And then also they're expensive. When you have a slate with 26 offenses, obviously there's a very good chance that a few cheap offenses do really well. So it does, if you are going to go to a full stack like the Dodgers, where you have $6,500 Ohtani, and then you have a lot of other guys between 4 and 5K, the opportunity cost is just naturally higher when you have 25 other offenses. The counterpoint to that is you do have more cheap pitching options too, whether it ends up being Freeland or Sheehan or somebody I'm not playing. There's going to be cheap pitchers that do well today almost without a doubt. But there are just other offenses that, as a stack overall, I like more than the Dodgers. For the Red Sox here, I like getting to them. I like getting to Sheehan. This is very similar, I think, to the Freeland and Orioles spot, where the Red Sox are clearly a flawed offense, but they have upside in this park, and they're cheap. $6,400 high K guy in Sheehan on one side, high strikeout, but also quality power in this park for cheap on the other side. The most expensive hitter in the Red Sox projected lineup is Bregman at 4,500. Duran is only 4,200. Abreu, who's very good, is 4,300. Rafael is 4,200. But then like Trevor Story, sub 4K. Narvaez is sub 4K. If Meyer, who left either yesterday or the day before his game early, is in the lineup, he's only 2,800. Toro's 2,700. This is mostly an inexpensive stack in a good run scoring environment against a still unproven major league pitcher in Emmett Sheehan. Yeah, he has good strikeout stuff, but he is, very young, not proven yet at the major league level. If you go back to 2023, 170 expected ISO allowed to lefties, 179 to righties, a 25 to 26% strikeout percentage to both sides. I think it's very similar to the Orioles and Freeland spot where with there being 13 games, I'm not going to go so far as to say like one side of it is definitely or super likely to be a tournament winner. But when you consider range of outcomes and not just median projection, it's very easy to see the upside that comes with either Sheehan or with this Red Sox offense. So not much ownership coming into Boston, 5% to Bregman, 6% to Duran, 5% to Story, less than that to everyone else. I'm getting to 18% Bregman, 17% Duran, 11% Story, 9% Narvaez, 6% or less everywhere else. So it's not that I'm jamming the entire offense, but I am over the field on Bregman, Duran, Story, Narvaez, Meyer, Abreu. Technically, like I have 5% at 2% owned. So I do think the Red Sox are an interesting stack to get to in your non-Sheehan lineups here. Just another spot, another game that sets up, or another matchup rather, that sets up as one that I think you actually can just play both sides, and there's very obvious reasons to do it. If I had to pick one, like I don't think there's a correct answer. I think if you prefer the Red Sox, like if you're playing single entry, because I know that's always the issue when you watch a show like this, is if I'm playing 50 lineups or I'm playing 150 lineups, obviously I have more room to say, okay, well, I'm going to be over on Sheehan and I'm going to be over on the Red Sox. If you're playing one lineup and you have to pick one side, the honest answer is I don't think it matters. Just if you want to get to that game, pick whichever one you like more. I think that there is value in being contrarian with Sheehan. I think there's value in being contrarian with the Red Sox. You can obviously make lineups that project to make you money with either one. So whichever one you want to go to, if you have two pitchers you really like and you want to get to the Red Sox, great. If you need a cheap pitcher and you don't have the Red Sox, go to Sheehan. Like I think you can kind of just pick either side and be perfectly fine with it, whichever you prefer. For the next game, we have the Rays taking on the Reds in Cincinnati. Another good ballpark for offense. Two teams with totals right around 5. Zach Littell on the mound for Tampa. Nick Martinez going for the Reds. 3% ownership coming into Zach Littell. I'm getting to none. I'm getting to 3%, so I'm right in line with the field at 7,600. No ownership coming into Nick Martinez. I'm not getting to him either. Littell does have a solid matchup against the Reds, but the park rather obviously does suck. Cincinnati is 7th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. They are 17th in WRC+. Littell comes into the game with a 17% strikeout percentage, which is down 4.5 points from last year in 122 innings pitched. So, he's somebody on a lot of slates. Maybe I would be more willing to take shots on him. But on this one, like if I am going to go to a pitcher that doesn't strike out a lot of guys, I can just go all the way down to Freeland. If I'm going to go to a cheap pitcher that is risky, I can at least get strikeout upside with Sheehan at low ownership. So I don't have much of Littell and I don't have any Nick Martinez. It is a good strikeout matchup against Tampa, but they do also have a lot of good hitters, a lot of power in that lineup. For the offenses, starting on the Tampa side, 7% ownership coming into Junior Caminero is the high mark. Chandler Simpson getting 9%, followed by 7% for Caminero. Mostly 5% ownership, give or take, to the hitters on Tampa Bay. I'm not getting to them too much. I have 10% or 11% Caminero, so I'm a little over the field there. I have 7% Jonathan Aranda, 5% or less of everyone else. Certainly another offense that if you tell me you want to play them instead of the Orioles, or you want to play them instead of the Red Sox, like great, they look good, the park's good. Nick Martinez, not a terrible pitcher, But so far this season, 175 expected ISO to lefties, 160 to righties. Does have a strikeout percentage 8 points higher against lefties, but it's still only 21%. So I think, if you're going to Tampa, just whatever fits into your lineup. Obviously, the best hitters, the most dangerous hitters on Tampa Bay this season against right-handed pitching. Yandy Diaz, 194 expected ISO. Aranda, 285. Caminero, 238. Josh Lowe, in general, is a good hitter and has some stolen base upside. Chandler Simpson doesn't give you any power upside, but if he gets on base, he's getting at least 5 points per trip as long as nobody's ahead of him. So you have plenty of stolen base upside there if you want to get to Simpson. Tampa looks good. They're just not a team that, at least right now, I personally am prioritizing. On the other side, not getting to a ton of Cincinnati as a whole, but individually, I am getting to Elly De La Cruz, which shouldn't surprise anybody. He's only projected for about 8% ownership here. I'm getting to about 18 to 19%. Another pay-up option that I'm able to get to because of the amount of Freeland I have, the amount of Sheehan I have, and I'm more than happy to do it. Gives you a ton of stolen base upside, gives you a bunch of power upside. You have him from his preferred side of the plate. 17% strikeout percentage against lefties for Littell this year. 226 expected ISO allowed. That sets up really nicely for De La Cruz. Also a 17% strikeout percentage and 226 expected ISO to righties. So it doesn't really matter what side of the plate you hit from. Zach Littell has not been able to strike you out this year, and he has given up a lot of power. I believe he leads baseball in home runs allowed. I'm not going to swear to that, but I think it's the case. So there is power upside here. I like De La Cruz a lot. Beyond that, I do have 10% Matt McClain, which is basically 2x the field. I have 8% TJ Friedl, which is 2x the field. And then I'm 4% or less on everyone else. Very high home run projection here on De La Cruz, also on Aranda, on Caminero. You can see Will Benson here. I do think that I will like Will Benson at 3,500 if he's in the lineup. He is not in the projected lineup that SaberSim had. And as I mentioned before, I just use their projected lineup because otherwise it throws off my sim process and makes everything I'm talking about even more meaningless than maybe you already think it is. So Will Benson, that's why I didn't mention getting to him. I assume that I will be getting to him if he's in the lineup. 3,500 with this, massive home run projection. I would like him a lot. Like, he's a swing and miss guy with a lot of power against the pitcher that gives up power and doesn't get swings and misses. That's one of my favorite spots to attack. So if Benson is in the lineup, I do like him as well. Next, we have the Tigers hosting the Toronto Blue Jays. Blue Jays went nuts yesterday after a slow start against Reese Olson. Today, we have Jose Barrios for the Blue Jays. We have Keter Montero for the Tigers. For the pitchers, I am not really interested in either one. 5% ownership is coming in to Barrios. None is coming into Montero. Very, very bad strikeout spot for Montero. 6,200. Again, I would just rather go to Sheehan. I'd rather go to Freeland if I'm paying down. 7,400 for Barrios in a tough matchup as well. Tigers have not been playing well lately. They've lost 10 of, I think, their last 11, but still a good offense overall. They rank 10th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching this season. They are 4th in strikeout percentage, so there is some strikeout upside here for Barrios potentially. He is getting a park upgrade in Comerica as well compared to the Rogers Center. So, like, if you wanted to take some shots on him at 7,400 at low ownership, you could. If you're watching and so far you've heard me say I'm playing Freeland and you don't want to do that. You've heard me say I'm playing Sheehan and you don't want to do that. But you do need a low-owned pitcher that isn't super expensive. Like, you can go to Barrios and hope for the best. He's not a terrible pitcher, but I do personally just prefer getting to the cheaper options that project pretty similarly. 20.5% strikeout percentage in 121 innings pitched this year for Barrios. But, certainly if you just don't want to go down to those cheap guys, you think Barrios is a little bit better. It's not crazy, but it is a tough matchup overall. There is just strikeout upside for him as well. From a splits standpoint for Barrios this season, striking out 22.5% of lefties, 18% of righties, 261 expected ISO to righties, 155 to lefties. So he has been reverse split so far this year, both in terms of strikeouts and in terms of power allowed. That is kind of nice for him against the Tigers because, obviously Torkelson has a lot of power. Torres, is having a good year. Baez is having a good year. But if you buy into those reverse splits, which I kind of do, kind of don't, because it hasn't been the case for very long. For most of his career, he was a traditional splits guy. But, Riley Green has a lot of power. Colt Keith will be hitting from the left side. Perez, McKinstry, Parker Meadows. Like, these guys would all be hitting left-handed. So it is if you buy into them, a little bit of a bump probably facing Detroit. But for the Blue Jays bats, I'm not really getting here. The field's not getting too much either. 6% ownership to Barger, 5% to Guerrero, to Springer. I have 3% Addison Barger at 4,200, and that's pretty much the extent of my Blue Jays. I don't think Montero is a great pitcher or anything like that. I do think there are a lot of better parks for hitting home runs today, and that's probably what is driving my lack of Toronto the most. Montero has allowed a 271 expected ISO to lefties, nearly 400 expected WOBA. Addison Barger, has been very, very good this year. He is still affordable. 394 expected WOBA, 283 expected ISO, and 235 plate appearances against right-handed pitching. I think individually he does look good here, but there's just so many hitters on the slate that I happen to not really be getting to much of the Blue Jays at all. 3% Barger, again, is the one I'm getting to the most. Montero has held righties to a 133 expected ISO this year, 284 expected WOBA, 21% strikeout percentage against righties compared to 12% against lefties. So he's actually been legitimately good against righties. He's just been absolute garbage against lefties, but there's not a whole lot that you can target from the left side on the Blue Jays. It's basically Addison Barger, Nathan Lucas, Will Wagner, if he's in the lineup. And again, Comerica compared to a lot of other parks on this slate. We've already talked about Yankee Stadium. We've talked about Camden Yards. We've talked about Fenway. We've talked about Great American. Going into Comerica, even in a solid enough matchup, isn't exactly where I want to be. And then you maybe have a good Tigers bullpen behind Montero. For most of the year, it's been a good bullpen. Lately, I don't think it's been as good. And you just kind of get that kind of volatility in general with bullpens. But overall, like the matchup against the starter is solid for at least the left-handed Jays. But the park's not ideal for hitting home runs. The bullpen matchup probably could be better. So it's just a team that looks fine, but I'm not really getting to. On the Tigers side, same thing. There's plenty of times that I target pretty heavily against Barrios. I'm never upset about getting to the Tigers because of the talent in their lineup. But on this slate, the field's not getting there. I'm not getting there. 3 to 4% ownership coming into Riley Green and Colt Keith is the highest for the field. 2% Colt Keith, 1% Riley Green is the highest for me personally right now. So mostly not getting to too much of that game, pitchers or hitters. San Diego taking on the Cards in St. Louis. This game went crazy yesterday. A lot of home runs, high-scoring game, hot and humid in St. Louis. Today, I'm not sure. I assume it's probably more of the same. That is generally the weather in St. Louis this time of year. I know I've talked about it on shows in the past. Having lived in St. Louis, it's very similar to living in the Mid-Atlantic, in the Baltimore area. And from like a heat humidity standpoint, and for baseball, what that means is that park factors can really change actually based on the time of the year. Like hitting in St. Louis at the beginning of the season and the end of the season is pretty unfavorable for hitting home runs. But over the summer, it can be pretty advantageous. Looks like it's supposed to be in the 90s again today. So probably pretty solid hitting weather overall. You have only about a 4 total for the Cardinals in a tough matchup against Pivetta. For the Padres, between 4.5 and 5 in a much better matchup against Michaelis. For the pitching here, 9% ownership coming into Pivetta at 10,200. No ownership coming into Miles Michaelis at 6,500. I'm not getting to any Michaelis. I have 5% Pivetta. He is very good. The matchup, though, is not ideal. The Cardinals are a tough team to strike out. They have been an above-average offense this year. 28% strikeout percentage for Pivetta is the third highest on the slate. Second highest if you discount Zebby Matthews at his 23 innings. The only pitcher that has been in the rotation all season long that has a higher strikeout percentage today than Nick Pivetta is Mackenzie Gore going up against Minnesota. So the strikeout upside is obviously there, but you are paying for it at $10,200. You do have plenty of cheap pitching options on this slate. The Cardinals' active roster against right-handed pitching this year ranks 27th in strikeout percentage. They rank 8th in WRC+. So I'm getting a little bit of Pivetta, but not a priority for me. For the offenses here, certainly a better matchup for the Padres. I wish I were getting more. We're getting about 7%, 8% ownership to Fernando Tatis and to Manny Machado. I have like 3%, 3 to 5%, 3% Tatis, 5% Machado. Those are my two highest owned guys on the Padres. The 7% ownership coming into them is the high mark as well. Another just good enough offense, at least at the top in a good matchup, but I'm personally not really getting to them. 231 expected ISO to righties for Michaelis this year, 251 to lefties. If you want to get to more Tatis, Machado, Jackson Merrill, by all means, like those guys are in a good matchup. I mentioned Gavin Sheets yesterday, but I'll mention it again now for anybody that missed yesterday. Gavin Sheets not only is having a very productive year in terms of production, 243 expected ISO, 371 expected WOBA. His strikeout percentage is down to 20% against right-handed pitching. So really interested to see with him. This is somebody that you go back to his time with the White Sox, he would strike out. Like he was a very flawed hitter that had power. And it was just a matter of like, well, can he make contact? And the answer was usually going to be no. Now he's making quality contact consistently. He's not striking out. He doesn't have the same holes in his swing that he used to. And it's not really reflected in his salary. He's $3,500. So he's somebody that I'm not getting to. Like I said, I'm not really getting to the Padres here. But if you want to target Michaelis, which is something that in general I highly recommend on most slates, definitely include Gavin Sheets with your Tatis, Machado, Jackson Merrill, as far as guys that do a lot of damage in this Padres lineup. On the other side for the Cards against Pivetta, I'm not getting to them. The field's not getting to them. Alec Burleson would be my highest owned guy, 3% of my lineups. Wilson Contreras getting 2% ownership is the high mark for the field. There's just plenty of mediocre to not good pitching on this slate. I don't really need to target Nick Pivetta. I can find low-owned bats elsewhere without targeting Nick Pivetta. If you do want to target Nick Pivetta, he does give up power. 211 expected ISO to righties this year, 190 to lefties, 28% strikeout percentage against both sides of the plate. Again, he's a good pitcher. He gets strikeouts, but obviously one of the most talented pitchers on the slate, but will give up some power, just not a spot where I need to target it. Josh said to use umpire data. Haven't used it much this year. I don't look at it specifically. It can be somewhat useful, but I think it's really noisy. I think in general, like I'm going to be better off just not really caring. So yeah, I've never been a huge proponent of it. I liked it back in like 2017, 2018 when nobody really even knew it existed. And projections in general were a lot less sophisticated. I liked it back then just because like if I can get a pitcher that I'm already interested in, and then I find out he has like Doug Eddings behind the plate, and I know that nobody's paying attention to that, it's certainly not something that hurts. But now I think people kind of like everybody knows it exists. It's baked in at least somewhat into different projection models, into Vegas totals, and I think people probably overestimate its importance now. So whatever marginal advantage you get from singling it out specifically is probably just wiped away by people overvaluing it. So no, I mean any game like it, basically at this point, umpires for me, if I'm watching the game and I see like Doug Eddings is behind the plate and I have the pitcher, I'm like, oh, cool. I'm glad I have that pitcher. Or I'm watching the game and I see a pitch get called a foot outside and then I realize who the umpire is. I'm like, oh shit, this is gonna be a long game, if I have the hitters. But it's not something that I'm actively paying a lot of attention to or any attention to necessarily. Cubs taking on the White Sox in Chicago. 3.5 to 4 total for the White Sox, a little north of 5 for the Cubs. 6% ownership coming into Shota Imanaga at 9,900. Adrian Hauser not getting any ownership at 8,500, and I can't imagine why he would. Obviously, now that I've said that, he's going to throw like a no-hitter with 12 strikeouts or something, but 8,500 is a crazy price tag for Hauser. Matchup against the Cubs is dog shit. For Imanaga, he does have a solid matchup here against the White Sox. Obviously, one of the worst teams in baseball, but 9,900 is a hell of a price tag to pay for Shota Imanaga on a slate where you just have an abundance of at least decent, cheap pitching options. He is only striking out 18% of hitters this year. That's down 7% from last year in 75 innings pitched. His stuff plus grade is down this year. His command has still been excellent. He has a 4.82 xFIP compared to a 2.4 ERA. So this is a perfect example of ERA driving pricing to a pretty large extent on DraftKings. When you have a pitcher striking out less than 20% of hitters that has a nearly 5 xFIP and he's $9,900, partly, that's because of the matchup with the White Sox, but it's also that he has this outstanding ERA that isn't backed up by anything else. So I'm getting to 10% of him at 6% owned. If I'm going to a cheap stack, I just have the money left over. Maybe I can't get the $200 for Pivetta without blowing everything up, or $300, whatever it was. Fine. Like he's still facing a team with one of the lowest totals on the slate, but I'm not going out of my way to get the Imanaga here at that price. For the offenses, Cubs, not getting too much ownership here. 7% to Tucker, 6% to PCA, less than 5% to everyone else. That's pretty much how it's going for me as well. I have 5% PCA, 5% Michael Busch, 4% Tucker, less than that everywhere else. Tucker is day to day as well. I would love to get to the Cubs anytime that they play. They are arguably on any given slate the biggest or the best combination of home run upside and stolen base upside. They run a ton. They have a lot of different guys on their team that steal bases. Most of their lineup has legitimate home run upside, but they're also just always one of the most expensive stacks. I mentioned it with the Dodgers, but it's even more extreme with the Cubs, where Tucker is 6,300, PCA is 5,800, Suzuki is 5,100, Busch is 5,600, and then it drops off. But even Ian Happ is 4,600, Carson Kelly is 4,200. It becomes really difficult to get all these guys together, and so it's more so grabbing one or two of them at a time. But then the other problem with the Cubs is not only are they very expensive in terms of the actual cost, the opportunity cost is high at their specific positions. Like Kyle Tucker, $6,300 outfielder, great. You also have Aaron Judge in the outfield. You also have Shohei Ohtani in the outfield. You also, on most slates have Juan Soto in the outfield amongst 100 other good plays. PCA and Suzuki are also outfielders. So like the guys that you would want to get to the most all play the outfield. Michael Busch at first base, you have opportunity costs there as well, obviously. So the actual pricing and the positions they play generally makes it pretty tough for me to prioritize the Cubs, and today is no different. As far as Hauser goes, less or sub 100 expected ISO so far against righties this year, 140 to lefties. Not good at getting strikeouts, but he has been good at limiting power so far. If you go back to last year, 106 expected ISO to righties, 178 to lefties. Not a total gas can in terms of limiting power, but there is tons of talent in this Cubs lineup if you can afford them. I just can't. For the White Sox, I'm not getting to them either. Neither is the field. They're the White Sox. I'm glad I'm not getting to them. Normally I do. Imanaga, like I said, hasn't been great this year. 225 expected ISO against right-handed pitching. If you do need to save money and go to the White Sox, you do have right-handed bats in Caro, Mydroth, Vargas, Robert. The ones I would prefer are Vargas and Robert. But again, they're just not really showing up as necessary for me on this slate. They have, I think, the lowest total. And there's just plenty of low-owned, relatively cheap teams I can get to instead. Nathan Eovaldi on the mound for the Rangers, taking on the Braves. Joey Wentz going for the Braves. 6K for Wentz. Not interested in him. I'm not getting there. Neither is the field. 10% ownership coming into Nathan Eovaldi. I'm about half that at 5%. Again, he's relatively expensive at 9,600. He looks fine here. He's a good pitcher overall. Has the fourth highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 27%. In 91 innings pitched this year. Very, very good command, and it's been even better this year compared to last year. I think he's a good pitcher. I just, for the most part, am not paying up that much at pitcher tonight. I'm prioritizing getting to some of these expensive bats like Judge, like Ohtani, like De La Cruz. I like relatively some of the cheap arms. So I am having trouble getting to too much Eovaldi. The Braves have been a favorable matchup, at least lately. They've been disappointing for pretty much the entire season. They rank 11th, tied for 9th, actually, in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. They rank 19th in WRC plus on their active roster. So you do have dangerous hitters in this lineup. It's not a cakewalk, but as a whole, this team has underperformed this year. The bottom of the order is not particularly good. If you can, kind of navigate your way through Olsen, Acuna, Riley, Murphy, there are weak spots in the lineup. If you don't have your best stuff, they certainly can do damage. But if he doesn't have his best stuff, you're probably not getting there at 9,600 anyway. So I would throw Eovaldi in that same bucket with like Pivetta, where he's certainly one of the most talented pitchers on the slate. And if you're playing cheap hitters, or if you just have an aversion to going to the cheap pitching I'm going to, Eovaldi is fine. He's just not a big part of my plans, at least right now. For the bats, I'm not getting to the Braves against Eovaldi. Neither is the field. Ronald Acuna is in 2% of my lineups. So is Matt Olson. That's pretty much it. It's not a spot where, I'm looking to like stack against Eovaldi for leverage or anything like that. He's not super popular, and it's a big enough slate that I don't need to. It's mostly just that Eovaldi is expensive enough that I don't really think I need his points all that often. And it's not like the Braves are super cheap or anything like that, at least the ones that I would want to get to. On the Texas side, about a 4.5 total there. I am getting to them a little bit more than the Braves, at least. 5 to 6% ownership coming into Higashioka and Seager. About 5% coming into Semien as well. Only 2% coming into $4,200 Wyatt Langford. He's my highest owned Ranger. He is in 12% of my lineups. I always get to him a lot, it seems like. And I think a lot of it just has to do with the stolen base projection here. He does have power upside as well, has the platoon advantage against Wentz. I'm getting to 7% Higashioka, 5 to 6% on Seager, Young, Semien. So I'm pretty much around the field outside of Langford on Texas as just, a 5% owned stack, give or take. Not a priority for me, but I am getting to some. We have the A's taking on Houston in Houston. Didn't want to forget this game. Jeffrey Springs pitching for the A's at 6,900. Ryan Gusto is on the mound for the Astros at 6,600. Good strikeout spot for Gusto. He is getting about 6% ownership. I'm not getting to him right now, but certainly if you wanted to play him instead of Sheehan, I think it's fine. I'm a little surprised that I don't have any Gusto, given that I had 12% Sheehan and 28% Freeland. I kind of thought I would have it mixed up between them because I think Gusto looks okay here as well. Again, good strikeout matchup, although if you do have Wilson and Andujar in the lineup, it does pull it down a little bit, but Butler strikes out at an above average rate. Nick Kurtz is a fantastic hitter, but does strike out a lot. Rooker strikes out. Soderstrom strikes out. So pretty good strikeout spot for Gusto, but not one of the cheap pitchers that I personally am prioritizing right now. Does come in with a 23% strikeout percentage in 56 innings pitched. Average stuff in terms of stuff plus, above average command. If you want to go there, great. He's just not one of the ones I'm getting to. 10% ownership coming into $6,900 Jeffrey Springs. I have 13%, so I am using him as a value option at least a little bit. 17.5% strikeout percentage this year in 101 innings pitched. Decent matchup against Houston. Not a great strikeout matchup, but he is relatively inexpensive. He is somebody that historically has been reverse splits because of a very good changeup. So far this year, that hasn't really been the case. 191 expected ISO allowed to righties compared to 164 to lefties. Only an 18.5% strikeout percentage to righties. Does still have a 24% swinging strike percentage on that changeup, though. So I'm getting to him right around the field as like a 10 to 12% guy. Not super confident in him, but he is cheap. For the offenses here, not getting to the A's, neither is the field. I have 2% Butler, Rooker, Kurtz. Fields at 3% Kurtz, 3% Rooker. There is plenty of power upside for the A's. They do have some stolen base upside as well, but there's just enough other offenses that I like that I'm not really getting to much of Sacramento, Oakland, whatever. I am getting to some Astros here, specifically Yainer Diaz. 10% ownership coming into Diaz, 10% coming into Altuve, 10% coming into Christian Walker, 7% to Dubon and Cam Smith. Pretty similar for the most part to the field, with the exception of Diaz. I am at 26% of him. He is $3,200 tonight. Catcher is, just never a particularly strong position, and Diaz does have power. Limited sample against lefties this year, has a 261 expected ISO in 64 plate appearances, 233 plate appearances since last year, 370 expected WOBA, 211 expected ISO. I just think that he's too cheap in this spot against Springs. As I mentioned, Springs hasn't been very good at limiting right-handed power so far this season. So I like Diaz individually. And then I am getting 12% Altuve, 11% Walker, 7% Smith. I think that all of these guys look fine. As a whole, Houston is pretty cheap. They do have right-handed power bats with the Crawford boxes in left, get some pulled fly balls against Springs. I think they're a good stack. I think that, they're relatively high owned for the slate, but you're still only talking about, 10% or so to the highest owned guys. Cam Smith, obviously a very limited sample, but has hit left-handed pitching well so far with a 435 expected WOBA, 296 expected ISO in 71 plate appearances. Christian Walker really hasn't done anything against them since last year, 127 expected ISO in 228 plate appearances, but he's also only 3,200. So I'll take his, career-long track record of being a good power hitter. Einsteinium said Houston gets steamed. Yeah, I can actually check. So right now, I didn't have any I didn't notice any huge gaps in ownership projections for offenses, but I do have Houston ownership projected higher than the industry does in general. With it being a 13-game slate, again, I don't think that there's any massive spots. I don't think there's any teams coming in at 25% owned that are projected for 10%. But I do have Houston projected to be a bit higher owned than the industry does, and that is them being 10% owned or so. But they do meet the criteria of the teams that do get pushed up by Sims tools when you just have these really cheap offenses that have power. They project well enough. they do just get bumped up a little bit. And I think that probably will be the case relative to where maybe some other sites have them projected. Seattle is taking on the A's, or the Angels rather, in Anaheim. For the Mariners, it is Brian Wu in a very good strikeout spot. For the Angels, it is Jose Soriano. $7,200 price tag on Soriano, $10,500 price tag on Wu. Keep in mind, this is a big park downgrade for him. He is a good pitcher in a good strikeout spot, but getting out of T-Mobile Park is not ideal for any of these Seattle pitchers. Wu comes in with a 24% strikeout percentage, which is up nearly 3 points from last season in 120 innings pitched. He has above average stuff. He has excellent command. He's a very, very good pitcher. He's getting 17% ownership. I have 17%, so I have more of him than $10,000, $200, or $10,200 Pivetta. I have more of him than $9,900 Imanaga. I'm right around the field at 17%. He is a good pay-up option if you can find the salary. I actually have more of Jose Soriano. He's getting 10% ownership at 7,200. I have 26%. He has strikeout ability, kind of depending on the day. We've seen some starts where he's really bad and doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. We've seen other starts where he just goes out there and racks them up. Overall this season, 20% strikeout percentage. Very, very good command so far. His stuff plus grade is actually down 13 points from last year, but his command has been better, well above average. So this is a spot that I think there's a lot of volatility, kind of just depending on what Jose Soriano you get that day. It is a park upgrade for the Mariners. They do have dangerous hitters in their lineup, but Soriano is one of the best ground ball pitchers in the league. And then you factor in that he's shown the ability at times to really rack up strikeouts. I don't know if I haven't figured out what drives that. Like, I haven't really found changes in what he throws. I haven't found changes in his arm slot. So I don't really know what drives the strikeout ability coming and going, but we know it's at least there sometimes. And at 7,200 and relatively low ownership, I am fine with taking some shots at that. Mariners bats against him. I'm not getting to too much. I have 5% Raleigh, 4% Rodriguez. Those are my highest owned guys. They are also projected to be the highest owned guys by the field at 4 to 5%. Same goes for Randy Arozarena at 4,400. As I mentioned with Soriano, whether or not he's striking guys out, he is a very good ground ball pitcher, one of the highest ground ball rates in the league amongst qualified starters. Only a 115 expected ISO allowed to both lefties and to righties. Does have some splits in terms of strikeouts, 23.5% K percentage against righties, only 17% against lefties. You'll probably have a pretty balanced Seattle lineup, probably skewing lefty heavy. Also, one thing to keep an eye on here is if Josh Naylor is available. The Mariners traded for him yesterday. He is a low K guy. He is a good hitter, a lot of power. If he's in the lineup, it does lower Soriano's strikeout projection at least a little bit, lower his projection in general because it is adding a very good hitter to the lineup. So that is one thing to pay attention to here with Seattle. For the Angels against Wu, I don't have him. Field doesn't have him. I have 3% Adele, 3% Moncada. Those are my highest owned guys. Field has 2% Neto, 2% Trout. Plenty of slates that I play the Angels, even in tough matchups, especially at home in a good park for power. But again, 13-game slate, I can just kind of pick spots that I actually like as opposed to stacking against one of the best pitchers on the slate. And then wrapping it up with the Mets. Still have to get to Washington, Minnesota. I missed that one. And I missed Cleveland. Yeah, all over the place here. Cleveland taking on Kansas City, going to go back in time. We have the Guardians with Gavin Williams. We have the Royals with Michael Wacha. About a 4 to 4.5 total for both of these teams. Wacha getting 4% ownership. Williams getting 4% ownership. I don't have much of either one. 2% Wacha, 1% Williams for me right now. Tough strikeout matchup for Williams. Park downgrade, 4 strikeouts as well. He is a talented pitcher if you just want to go on talent, but Kansas City has the second lowest strikeout percentage in baseball this year against right-handed pitching. As you would expect, it is lower at home. It's a very tough park for getting strikeouts. Williams comes in with about a 24% strikeout percentage, slightly above average stuff. His command has been well below average this year, which is a change from last year. But when he is able to locate, he does give you legitimate strikeout upside. But again, the matchup itself is very difficult. Wacha on the other side, not a very good strikeout pitcher. Decent strikeout spot against Cleveland. But again, the park hurts, and you just have cheaper pitchers that I would rather roll the dice on than Wacha. For the bats here, good park for scoring runs, good park for pretty much everything offense except for home runs, and obviously home runs matter a lot in DFS. I'm not really getting to the Guardians. The field's getting to 7% Ramirez. I have 3. He is still my highest owned Guardian. I have like 2 to 3% of most of them. So far this season, Waka has held lefties to a 137 expected ISO. Righties have done more damage, 183 expected ISO. So he hasn't been terrible against righties, but he has continued to be reverse splits, which is something that's been true for most of his career. Very change-up reliant, so it's not surprising. But we also don't really have any right-handed power to speak of for the Guardians. Ramirez, Jones, Naylor, Kwan, Manzardo, Santana, all left-handed. Martinez, left-handed. Going to be like an exclusively left-handed lineup, probably. So Josh Bell, or sorry, not Josh Bell. Yeah, Carlos Santana already mentioned. Pretty much exclusively left-handed here against Waka. Not really what you actually want. For the Kansas City side, I seem to always get a lot of them. And for once, I'm not. 5% Bobby Witt for me, 6% for the field is the high mark. Jonathan India, 3% for me, 5% for the field. Again, there's just so many good offensive environments on this slate that Kansas City is not exactly where I'm looking to go. Stephen Leibowitz said if you are looking for reasons not to play Woo, he gives up as many fly balls as ground balls. Hard hit up a little this season, and xFIP is 3.56, about a half run higher than ERA. Yeah, that and the park. Like, it's in the context of Brian Woo starts, it's not ideal, but he is still a good pitcher. You just expect him to be a little bit, hurt by being outside of T-Mobile, and being outside of T-Mobile also makes fly balls. You have less margin for error on those. Nats taking on the Twins. Mackenzie Gore for the Nats. Zebby Matthews for the Twins. These are actually the 2 highest strikeout percentages on the entire slate. Again, you can kind of take Zebby Matthews somewhat with a grain of salt because he's only pitched 23 innings this year. Mackenzie Gore, 112 innings pitched, 29.8% K percentage for Matthews, 29.7% for Gore. Matthews was at 24% last year as well, and he does project to have good strikeout stuff. So you have about 14% ownership, give or take, coming into both of these guys. I'm getting a lot more of Zebby Matthews than I am Mackenzie Gore. He, at AAA this year, 8 starts, 36 innings pitched, struck out 31.8% of hitters, projects for around a 24% strikeout percentage in the majors going forward. 12% projected ownership at 7,100. I have 25%, so I'm about 2x the field on Matthews. 15% projected ownership to Gore at 8,700. I only have 2%. That one does scare me because I think Gore is a very good pitcher, but he's kind of expensive on this slate. And I don't mean expensive relative to his talent level. I just mean expensive relative to the pitchers it seems like I'm playing. With the exception of getting to 17% Woo, like Matthews is 7,200. Soriano is, I think, 7,200. Sheehan is cheaper. Freeland is cheaper than some hitters. It's a slate where the vast majority of my lineups, I'm saving money at pitching. I'm getting to bats that I want. And so Gore is just priced a little bit above that. If you can afford him, great. He is a good pitcher overall. I do believe in changes he's made so far this season. He's a highly regarded pitching prospect, part of the Juan Soto trade. 33.5% K percentage against lefties this year, 28.5% against righties. Very good if you can get to him, but I think he's kind of just getting squeezed a little bit for me, where in lineups where I have the salary, I'm probably getting to Woo or maybe Pivetta or maybe even Imanaga against the White Sox. And then in a lot of other lineups, I'm just prioritizing a group of cheap pitchers. Matthews, as I mentioned, I am about 2x the field. It's not a cakewalk against the Nats. They do obviously have some very good hitters in their lineup, but James Wood has been slumping a bit recently. Not that I'm reading into that too much, but you do see that often with young hitters that do have the type of success that James Wood had early in the season. Eventually, the league figures something out, and it's on them to then readjust. But CJ Abrams, James Wood, Luis Garcia, Bell, Lowe, these guys aren't easy outs at the top of the order, but then it does drop off a bit. You get Brady House, you get Lyle, you probably get Riley Adams and Jacob Young. Not to take anything away from those guys. They're mostly young prospects, but they're not, elite major league hitters or anything like that. Overall, the Nats active roster against right-handed pitching this season ranks 24th in WRC+. They also rank 25th in strikeout percentage, so not a great strikeout spot, but I like the price tag on Matthews. I like the strikeout ability that he has. I also bet under his strikeouts today, so a little bit of a natural hedge, although that obviously not by design, just how it's working out, and I'm not mad about it. For the offenses here, starting on the Nats side, I am getting a little bit above the field on their main pieces, and by that, I mean CJ Abrams, James Wood, Luis Garcia are all projected for about 4% ownership, and I have 8%. So it's nothing crazy. It's not any huge stand or anything like that. But clearly, like, those guys are really good. Zebby Matthews, since last season, has allowed a 237 expected ISO to left-handed hitters, 208 to righties. So while he has been able to strike hitters out at a high rate from both sides of the plate, he has given up power. Abrams, Wood, Garcia have plenty of it. Josh Bell has power at 3,200 and 4% owned. So I do have some interest in the power bats from the Nats. They're not as big a priority as plenty of other teams for me, though. For Minnesota against Gore, 7% ownership coming into Buxton, 6% to Lewis, 8% to Correa, 7% to Jeffers. I have 6% Buxton and Lewis, 3% or less of everyone else right now. So far this season, Gore against right-handed hitters, only allowing a 145 expected ISO with a 28.5% K percentage. Lefties striking out 33.5% of the time. They have hit for a little bit more power with a 183 expected ISO. But I think this is kind of a spot where if you want to bet on either the talent of Buxton or just the really cheap bats on the Twins, it's a reasonable argument, but it's just not a spot that I'm really needing or wanting to get to all that much. And then now, finally wrapping it up with the Mets and the Giants in San Francisco. For the Mets, Clay Holmes. For the Giants, Logan Webb. $9,300 price tag for Webb in a pretty tough spot. Clay Holmes, $7,500 against the Giants in a better spot, in a great place to pitch as well. 29% projected ownership coming into Webb. I'm about half that at 14%. So I am getting him at 9,300, but not getting as much as the field. His strikeout numbers this year are up through 131 innings pitched. He has struck out 25.8% of hitters compared to 20.5% last year. His command has been even better this year than last year. He's a very good pitcher. He's at home in a great park to pitch. That's why you have one of the lowest totals on the slate for the Mets. That being said, he is relatively expensive. The Mets offense ranks 22nd in K percentage against righties. They rank 6th, tied for 5th with Seattle in WRC+. It's not an ideal matchup. And I'm just not getting quite as much as the field because, again, I'm fine with taking my chances on some of these cheaper pitchers. Clay Holmes, I thought maybe I'd be getting a little bit more of at 7,500. It is a decent matchup for him in a good park. Giants are 14th in WRC+. They are 16th in strikeout percentage. Holmes himself is a decent pitcher since moving into the starting rotation this year. 108 innings pitched, 19% strikeout percentage, 4.07 xFIP. But he's getting 5% ownership. I'm only getting to 3%. So I'm not getting to him, even though I thought maybe I would. I am not getting to anything offensively in this game. If you feel the need to click on some Juan Soto or some Rafael Devers, by all means. But all these good hitting environments on the slate, I do not need to go to Oracle for offense. So to recap, starting with the pitching, you can see the highest projected pitchers on the screen. My highest owned pitchers right now, Kyle Freeland, Jose Soriano, and Zebby Matthews. It is that kind of slate for me, at least right now. Will Warren is 4th, tied with Brian Wu, and then Dean Kramer comes in next. So I'm taking some interesting approaches to pitching right now. Not that I'm super confident in any of them individually, but I am actually happy with how that looks for me because I think that, Freeland does have the potential to be a very good point per dollar play. I like that he's, outside of Colorado, lefty against the Orioles. But Soriano does actually have some strikeout upside. Matthews and Warren absolutely have strikeout upside. Dean Kramer is clearly a very good pitching play, but he's also going to be super popular. I like the overall approach I'm taking to pitching, even though I obviously would be lying if I told you I was super confident in Kyle Freeland or Jose Soriano or Zebby Matthews or Will Warren against the Phillies or anything like that. For catchers, switch over to hitters here. Highest projected on the screen. As far as my player exposures go, Yainer Diaz, Austin Wells, and Carlos Narvaez are my highest owned right now. At first base, Bryce Harper, Christian Walker, and Paul Goldschmidt for me. At second base, I am getting to Jackson Holliday, Jazz Chisholm, and Matt McClain. At third base, I am getting to Jordan Westburg, Alex Bregman, and Junior Caminero. At shortstop, Ellie De La Cruz, Gunnar Henderson, and Trevor Story. In the outfield, Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Tyler O'Neill, Trent Grisham, Ramon Laureano, Jarren Duran, Giancarlo Stanton. Overall stacks, So all stack types 2 through 5. I'm getting to the Yankees, the Orioles, the Astros, the Red Sox, and the Reds. For 5-mans, I'm getting to the Yankees, the Orioles, the Red Sox, the Phillies, and the Astros. Home run pick. I feel like I had one while I was talking, and then I forgot it. I sort by home runs. I'm not going to take Judge, Ohtani. I do really like Schwarber. I feel like him or Harper would be cheating. If not, then I like Schwarber in Yankee Stadium. But I'm going to say that they're cheating also. And so I'm going to go with some interesting names up here. I'll go James Wood off of Zebby Matthews. Like I said, Matthews does give up power. Wood certainly has plenty of it. So if Kyle Schwarber's cheating, I'll take James Wood. I don't even really know what the logic there is in saying that Schwarber would be cheating and Wood wouldn't, since they're both crazy good power hitters. But that's what I'm going to go with. Thanks for checking out the show. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Don't forget to sign up for projections at Run the Sims. Link is in the description below. Also, join our Discord. It is free. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to pay for anything. Just jump in Discord, talk ball over there, and keep an eye out for our announcement around NFL as well. Really excited for NFL season to kick off. We'll have our Sims going. We'll have our projections and all of that. Just keep an eye out for that. Also, good luck on your lineups tonight. Have a good weekend.